Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification. Real identification. Captain Marcus Webb stood in the crew's security line at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, his pilot's uniform crisp, his captain's stripes clearly visible on his shoulders, his airline ID badge hanging around his neck. But apparently, none of that was enough. The TSA agent, a middle-aged white man whose name tag read Daniels, held Marcus's pilot license like it might be counterfeit, turning it over repeatedly, squinting at it under the fluorescent lights. "This is my real identification," Marcus said calmly, though his jaw was tight. "That's my FAA-issued pilot license. I'm Captain Webb, flying the 747 to London in 90 minutes. Danielle's skepticism was palpable. "And I'm supposed to just believe that?" Behind Marcus, the crew's security line had backed up. His co-pilot, First Officer Jennifer Park, shifted uncomfortably. The flight attendants exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the first time one of their colleagues had been questioned like this, but it never got easier to witness. "You can call the airline," Marcus offered, his voice still controlled. "They'll confirm my identity and my flight assignment. Or," Daniels said, his tone hardening, "you could tell me where you really got this uniform and ID." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. "Not. Are these real? But where did you steal them?" A small crowd was forming now, other crew members, passengers in the adjacent security lines, airport staff. Phones were coming out. The familiar choreography of a confrontation going viral. What happened next would expose the assumptions people make about who can be a pilot and who can't. About uniforms that confer authority on some bodies but suspicion on others. And about the moment when someone's credentials are so undeniable that even the most stubborn bias has to bend. Because the real twist wasn't that Marcus was lying. It was that he was telling the truth. And when the actual situation became clear, everyone who doubted him would have to face exactly what their doubt revealed about them. The captain? Marcus Webb had wanted to be a pilot since he was 7 years old. He'd grown up in South Dallas, watching planes take off from Love Field, tracing their paths across the sky with wonder-filled eyes. His mother, a single parent working 2 jobs, had laughed when he told her his dream. "Baby, black folks don't fly planes. We fly in them if we're lucky." But Marcus had refused to let go of that dream. He joined the Air Force at 18, earned his wings at 23, flew combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. After his service, he'd worked his way through the commercial aviation ranks, regional airlines, cargo flights, finally landing with Transatlantic Airways 5 years ago. At 39, he was one of only 3% of commercial pilots in the United States who were black. He'd earned 4 different type ratings, logged over 8,000 flight hours, and had a spotless safety record. He was qualified to captain the largest commercial aircraft in the world. But none of that mattered to TSA agent Daniels, who was now calling over his supervisor. "This doesn't look right," Daniels said, holding up Marcus's pilot license. "The photo seems off. The hologram might be tampered with." Marcus felt the familiar heat rising in his chest, not quite anger, not quite fear, but that exhausting combination of both that came from having to prove yourself to people who'd already decided you were guilty. "The photo is from 3 years ago," Marcus said evenly. "I've since grown a beard. The hologram is intact. And if you scan the barcode on the back, it'll pull up my entire FAA certification history. Anyone can fake a barcode," Daniels muttered. Jennifer, his co-pilot, stepped forward. "I can vouch for Captain Webb. We've been flying together for 2 years. He's one of the most experienced captains in our fleet." Daniels barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, please step back. This doesn't concern you." "It does concern me," Jennifer said, her voice rising. "He's my captain. We have a flight to prepare for. And you're harassing him based on nothing but your own prejudices." "Prejudices?" Daniels' face reddened. "I'm doing my job. Security requires that I verify suspicious credentials." "What's suspicious about them?" Jennifer demanded. "He's in full uniform. He has an airline ID. He has an FAA license. What exactly triggered your suspicion? The question hung in the air, unanswered but not unanswerable. Everyone knew the answer. They just couldn't say it out loud. The supervisor arrived, a woman in her 50s named Patricia Chin. She looked at Marcus, at Daniels, at the growing crowd of witnesses, and her expression suggested she knew exactly what was happening here. What seems to be the problem? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. This individual claims to be a pilot, Daniels said. But his credentials seem questionable. Seem questionable how? Patricia took the license from Daniels, examined it, then looked at Marcus. This appears to be a standard FAA commercial pilot license. What's the issue? The photo shows a clean-shaven man, and Captain Webb now has a beard. That's normal. Patricia scanned the barcode with her device. Marcus's entire certification record popped up on her screen. His ratings, his flight hours, his endorsements, his clean record. She looked at Daniels with an expression of profound disappointment. This is completely legitimate. There's no reason to detain this pilot. But I have concerns. Based on what? Patricia's voice had an edge now. Because if your concerns are based on the fact that he's black, we have a very serious problem. Danielle's face went from red to purple. That's not, I would never. Then let him through. Now. But Marcus wasn't moving yet. I'd like to know what specifically made you question my credentials. Because I've been flying for this airline for 5 years, and I've passed through this security checkpoint at least 200 times. But this is the first time I've been stopped and accused of having fake documents. I wasn't accusing. You asked me where I really got my uniform, Marcus said quietly. That's not verification. That's accusation. So I'm asking you directly, what made you suspicious? The crowd had grown larger. Marcus could see other airline employees gathering, some of them black pilots and flight attendants, who'd clearly experienced similar treatment. This moment wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person of color who'd had their qualifications questioned, their presence challenged, their right to occupy professional spaces doubted. Daniels opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Patricia for help that wasn't coming. And then a voice boomed across the security area. Marcus! There you are! Captain Richard Sullivan strode through the security checkpoint like he owned it, which, given his 30 years of seniority and status as Transatlantic Airways chief pilot, he practically did. He was white, silver-haired, 6'3", and possessed the kind of commanding presence that made people automatically defer to him. Richard, Marcus said, relief and frustration mixing in his voice. I'm being detained. Richard's jovial expression evaporated. Detained? Why? This agent doesn't believe I'm actually a pilot, Marcus said, gesturing to Daniels. Richard looked at Daniels like he just announced the Earth was flat. You don't believe he's a pilot? He's one of our best captains. He's senior to half our fleet. He's qualified on 3 different aircraft types. He turned to Marcus. Are you serious? They're questioning your credentials? Apparently my license looks fake. Richard snatched the license from Patricia's hand and held it up to Daniels. This is a legitimate FAA commercial pilot license. I should know. I've held one for 35 years. What exactly made you think it was fake? Daniels stammered. The photo didn't quite match. Oh, please. Richard's voice dripped with disdain. The photo is from 3 years ago. People change their appearance. I look nothing like my license photo from the 90s. He pulled out his own license, showing a picture of himself 20 pounds heavier with darker hair. Should someone detain me too? Silence. No, Richard continued. Interesting. Because I walk through here every week, and nobody's ever questioned whether my license is real. Nobody's ever asked where I really got my uniform. Why do you think that is? More silence. The kind that speaks volumes. Patricia Chin stepped in, clearly trying to de-escalate. Captain Sullivan, we're addressing this. Are you? Richard wasn't backing down. Because from where I'm standing, You've got one of the most qualified pilots in the country being treated like a criminal for the crime of flying while black. Captain, that's inflammatory. No, what's inflammatory is making my colleague miss his departure slot because some TSA agent decided he doesn't look like a pilot. Richard turned to Marcus. How long have you been detained? 27 minutes. 27 minutes. Richard looked at his watch. Our flight boards in 50 minutes. We need to do pre-flight checks, review weather, coordinate with ground crew. But instead, Captain Webb is standing here having to prove he has the right to wear his own uniform. Other pilots had gathered now, some from transatlantic, others from different airlines. Several were black or brown, and their presence created an unspoken solidarity. They'd all been here before, in different forms. A black female pilot stepped forward. I've been stopped 3 times this month, she said quietly. Always random checks. Always extra questions. An Indian pilot nodded. Twice last week. They always need to verify my credentials. A Latino pilot. I've had passengers ask to see my license before boarding. Passengers. Because they don't think I look like their idea of a captain. The stories poured out, each one adding weight to Marcus's experience. This wasn't isolated. This wasn't random. This was pattern, practice, protocol disguised as prejudice. Daniels looked increasingly uncomfortable as the testimonies stacked up. I was just doing my job. Your job is security screening, Richard interrupted. Not racial profiling. There's a difference, and you crossed that line. Patricia pulled Daniels aside for a whispered conversation that looked heated. Marcus could see the moment Daniels realized this wasn't going away quietly. His career had just collided with his bias, and the collision wasn't going well for him. Patricia returned, her expression grave. Captain Webb, on behalf of TSA, I sincerely apologize for this unacceptable delay and the disrespectful treatment you received. You're cleared to proceed immediately. And Officer Daniels will be removed from duty pending an investigation. An investigation? Richard's eyebrows shot up. That's it. Captain Sullivan. No, Patricia. We both know what happened here. Don't dress it up as an investigation that'll end with sensitivity training and a slap on the wrist. Richard looked at Marcus. What do you want to happen here? Marcus considered. He could walk away, take the apology, get to his flight. Or he could push for something more. Something that might actually create change. I want a formal review of all security stops in this checkpoint for the past 6 months, Marcus said. Demographic data. Who gets stopped, who gets detained, who gets questioned. And I want that data made public. Patricia hesitated. That's not something I can authorize. Then get someone who can, Marcus said firmly. Because if you don't, I'll be filing a formal discrimination complaint with the Department of Homeland Security, speaking to every news outlet that'll listen, and ensuring that this incident becomes a case study in how not to do airport security. It wasn't a bluff. Marcus's exhaustion had transformed into determination. He was tired of being the only one who had to swallow these indignities. Patricia pulled out her phone. Let me make some calls. Within 30 minutes, Marcus had commitments in writing, a formal investigation, demographic analysis of security stops, mandatory retraining for all TSA personnel at the checkpoint, and a direct line to file future complaints. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was something. As Marcus finally cleared security and headed toward his gate, Richard walked beside him. You handled that better than I would have. I've had practice, Marcus said dryly. You shouldn't have to. Richard's voice was quiet now, stripped of its earlier bravado. I meant what I said back there. You're one of our best captains. And the fact that you have to prove that repeatedly just because of your skin color is unacceptable. Thanks for speaking up. I should have spoken up sooner. Should have pushed the airline to address this years ago. Richard shook his head. Better late than never, I suppose. They reached the gate where Flight 1847 to London was preparing for boarding. The gate agent's eyes widened when she saw Marcus. Captain Webb! We were getting worried. Sorry for the delay, Marcus said. Security issue. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. As Marcus headed down the jetway toward his aircraft, he felt the familiar flutter in his chest, the one that never quite went away, even after thousands of flights. The thrill of commanding a machine that defied gravity, of safely transporting hundreds of souls across oceans. This was his dream. His calling. His right. And no amount of bias would take that away from him. Officer Daniels was terminated 2 weeks after the incident with Captain Webb. The investigation revealed he'd stopped and questioned black and brown crew members at 3 times the rate of white crew members over a 6-month period. The pattern was undeniable. Transatlantic Airways used the incident to launch a broader initiative about bias in aviation. Captain Webb became a spokesperson, sharing his story at industry conferences and pilot training programs. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack trended, with hundreds of pilots of color sharing their own experiences. The demographic data Marcus demanded revealed what many had suspected: security stops at DFW were disproportionately targeting crew members of color. The data forced systemic changes, new training protocols, oversight mechanisms, and accountability measures. But here's what didn't change: Marcus still had to prove himself more than his white colleagues. Still faced passengers who questioned his qualifications. Still navigated a professional world where his presence was treated as exceptional rather than normal. That's the reality for many professionals of color. The credentials are questioned. The authority is challenged. The right to occupy the space has to be re-earned constantly. If you're experiencing this, know that you're not imagining it. Document it. Report it. Speak up. Your voice matters, and patterns only become visible when people refuse to stay silent. If you're an ally like Captain Sullivan, use your privilege. Speak up when you see discrimination. Your voice carries weight that others' voices don't. Use it. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about racism, resistance, and the fight for dignity in everyday spaces. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Comment below. Have you ever had your qualifications questioned because of how you look? How did you respond? What would you do differently? Captain Webb earned his wings. He shouldn't have to keep proving he has the right to wear them. Let's make sure he doesn't have to.